let's move right on to the review. This week we are talking about Kanban EV. It is a 2020 release, though, let's be honest, it is virtually unchanged other than stylistically from the driver's edition Kanban 2014. So virtually the entire the same game. The changes have been small; they've been minor. It is designed by the amazing, the incomparable Vidal Lacerda. The artist is also the amazing, the incomparable Ian O'Toole, and ladies and gentlemen, he has outdone himself on this one. This is the original, the driver's edition is early Vidal Lacerda. If you look at early Vinhos, if you look at early Kanban and other sort of things, tremendously busy board. Tons of stuff happening, and very hard to quite wrap your head around where this section ends and this section begins. And in comes Ian O'Toole and just does a masterclass of guiding the eye through art, and in a beautiful, beautiful way. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the main ways we can look at the evolution of EV compared to the original. And I'm sure you're going to get into it, but it is that thing where the board now and just the tiles themselves and every part, every aspect of it reads in the clearest sense and makes the game just demonstrably better, even though the rules haven't changed too much. It's one of those examples where the art can lead the eye into a decision tree. It's great.
Yeah. Kanban is put out by Eagle Griffin Games. Let's jump right into it. I'm going to start before we even describe it and say I believe this is my favorite Vidal Lacerda game. I believe that it has. I've said this before, actually. I said this about the driver's edition. I do, for some reason, of all of his games, this is the one that hits the sweet spot for me. It isn't too punishing in terms of its baroqueness, but it's also not too simple. It for me, it's that sweet spot of payout. It's absolutely amazing. Alfred, will you tell us what we do in Kanban EV?
Yeah, it is it's funny because for a game that has so much, there's a little bit of punitiveness, but so much just thought has to go into each move. You do a very simple thing. You pick up your worker, you go to an office, you do that office's job.
That's right.
Of course, it has every implication that every decision has like a whole string of other actions. You can do a handful of things in each office. You can kind of advance in your certification, right? Your certification in that space, as well as you can do the move that's beneath you. And those moves consists of picking designs for a car, picking parts for that car.
Yes, we should say that we are the office that we're in is a car factory. We are designing cars, correct?
Specifically EV, right?
Yes.
In this new edition, specifically electric vehicle of all different ilks, right?
Right. In the original, there was no mention of EV. There was no mention of gasoline either, but we know that Vidal with CO2 is very dedicated to protecting our environment, and he's very concerned about the climate crisis. So this reskinning of Kanban as EV was kind of his statement of what he wants his game to focus on. He wants his game to focus on the aspirational and progressive aspects of business, which I think is great.
Even though, if I'm not mistaken, there's still transmission in the new edition, which I don't think EV cars have. Is that correct?
Transmission? No. What is the deal with that? Some of them do. I think the one of the car design types is hybrid. Maybe.
Maybe, yeah. And of course, they would have transmission.
That could be it. But yeah, I guess strictly electric vehicles, they tend to have a separate motor on well, actually, not all of them have a separate motor on each wheel. Some of them have one motor for the back, one motor for the front. Some of them even have just one motor. So I guess they're all different types.
Not to split hairs. It's genius design.
It's fair. It's fair.
It's genius design, and I love the fact that the reskin could also not only just be a change of look, but also a little change of that feel, right? That subsequent feel where you feel like you kind of get that sense you're playing a slightly different game, and it helps create. Yeah, it helps create a little bit more of kind of propulsion through your decisions, because indeed, as you pick, you have to, even though the board is laid out in a certain fashion, it has a lot to do with the subsequent actions of Susan, Karen, What's the name of our Sandra? Sandra.
Sandra, yes.
Sandra.
Sandra or Sandra, depending on which one sounds more like what she is in the game. Because
The office manager, the kind of boss, right?
yes, she is a little pink character that moves around, and there are two versions of the game. You can play with kind Sandra or mean Sandra. Mean Sandra is the way the game is designed to be played, really, let's be honest. Sandra is supposed to come in there, and she is supposed to berate us for failing to do all the things that we're supposed to do. Alfred, you've spent a lot of time in Japan. Can you tell us what Kanban means?
Yeah, I have spent a fair bit of time in Japan, but only quickly and never working for a corporation where Kanban is employed. Never working for a corporation, period. But yeah, Kanban is a management style. Kanban, right? I mean, that's
exactly right.
Yeah,
Yeah. The word Kanban literally means billboard in Japan, which is a funny thing because billboards are, for the most part, banned in Japan. You will see almost no billboards anywhere on any road or highway.
Even though at the Shibuya crossing, as you know all too well, it is
Sure.
full of electronic monitors, but they're different than billboards. It's different in that kind of way that they're quick, propulsive, sometimes backed by music, things that we don't really associate with our traditional billboard here. So it does have a very different definition there.
Correct. Yeah, in fact, I will try and put up on Facebook a picture of Alfred, myself, Paul, and friend of the pod, Matt Patterson, playing Tichu at the Osaka Castle. So we have spent some time in Japan together. That was a lot of fun. So Kanban is it's a management method. It's a method by which, sort of like GTD, getting things done, it's sort of a way of putting a team together on a project and working towards its conclusion without being completely top down, giving people some autonomy to function and figure out what the most important factor in completing the project needs to be now. I believe, if I may be stepping outside of my realm of expertise, but that's my understanding, which it makes sense in this game because we are each workers. And and one of the two things we do is we are going to move our workers to a new department. And then we are going to take actions in that department. And Alfred, you were about to say, I think you had started to say, what the things we do in these departments are.
Yeah, and so one of the things that's tricky is I'm going to list them partially out of order because that is how the game is played. You do not move in the same way, and there is some specificity to why things are laid out in a certain fashion. We don't have to get into all that, but there are an area where you can get designs and upgrades for parts. You can get parts. You can build cars. You can test those cars. These are all different spaces. And then there's also like an office work section where you can purely focus on the office work, or you can do a little bit of everything else. Am I missing anything?
That is a perfect distillation. You got them all.
Great. But I will say that some of these same spaces, as is very typical of Lacerda, you will be able to do more than just that. You will be kind of called upon to be very specific about either the requirements of a space, and those are changing per space. So you're playing basically 5 to 6 different games on the same board using similar worker placement, but then you have to think in very different ways about how those will chain together, what those chains will result in, and kind of the aspects to which you are thinking about the individual goals of on each round. So it's a lot to juggle at a time.
Exactly right. But in its basis, you are going to, at some point, get designs from the design department. And these are tiles that are going to go on your own personal player mat. You can hold up to 4 of them, I believe, at the beginning of the game. And then if you get certification in the design department, in other words, if you study enough to be very, very good in the design department, suddenly you've unlocked a 5th, or maybe it's a 6th, spot to put designs down. Those designs can later be used when cars roll off the assembly line and enter the research and design area. You could use a design of the same color as the car that's on the research and design track to test that car. And when you do, that car goes into your personal garage, and that could be worth a lot of points later in the game. Most of these designs also have a part assigned to them. So it is the green car that you're testing, but you're also testing the computer system, or you're also testing the chassis right? And so
And it
on.
should be mentioned that these are all worker placement spaces, and of course that means that scarcity is at play, both scarcity of designs, scarcity of parts, scarcity of cars, scarcity of space to put your workers. The thing you want at any given time will not necessarily be available. And there's lots of ways of mitigating that, but that's the game space. You will not get what you want. And
Precisely.
if you're in pole position, if you're in the lead, much like the Gallerist, much like many of these other games, you can make the game sing. But if you're not in that lucky position, I mean, you're hurting. Everybody's hurting.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Each you can think of the action selection spaces as a kind of rondel to some degree. There are 5 departments. Each department has 2 spaces where a person could place one of their workers. One space in almost all of the categories is a take 2 actions location, and one is a take 3 actions location. The take 2 actions location happens first, so if you want to go to design and there is a particular design that you must have, you're better off going into the 2 action space to make sure that you can grab it, even though you are basically losing 50%, an extra action that turn by doing so. So
you're seizing the initiative, but there is a ways of mitigating that as well, because you will be banking time, just like you're banking resources or banking designs. You can also bank time, or just get bonus time by doing certain actions. It is a bonusy system. You are definitely giving yourself that little bit of good feelings at every move. You will get bonuses, and you'll be showered with gifts, even though you know that later on you will be missing some critical element to totally make your plans work.
Yes, it's the Vittle Lacerda Scooby Snack design theory, which most of his games have. A lot of times you're going to be getting banked time that you could put into your time bank, and you can spend those later on to take extra actions in various spaces. You have books manuals essentially, that you can gain that will allow you to easily gain proficiency in different departments. And you also have spare parts. You have a parts voucher, which would allow you to grab a part of any color, because there are little cubes. Always these games, they're going to have little cubes of different colors, and those colors respond to the 5 or 6 different types of parts for these various cars.
And there's always a few too many. There's always a few too many options to do everything efficiently. So it's a wealth of riches, but a lot of decision tree. So
now Sandra comes into the game, and when Sandra comes into the game, she is going to move in an automated fashion. In other words, she is going to move, whatever department she's in, she's going to move to the next department if there's an available space in that department, and if there isn't, she's going to move to the next department and the first available space. And when she is there, she is going to look at the following. She's going to see who did the least amount of training in that department, who is the furthest down on the certification track. Now, remember, when you're there, you're going to have either 2 or 3 actions to take. If I'm in the design department, it takes 1 action to grab one of these designs. I want to grab these designs, but guess what? If I don't use
you absolutely need to grab these designs.
But if I don't use any of my actions to move up that certification track, I'm sitting at the bottom of it. And if I am, when Sandra comes there, guess who she's going to yell at? She's going to yell at me. And it's punitive at the beginning of the game. We start off with 15 points in the game, and Vittle did that for a reason. We start with 15 points because you could reasonably lose most or all of them depending upon how your early game goes. When Sandra says that when you're the low man on the totem pole, you are going to get docked 1 victory point plus 1 victory point per banked time you do not have up to 5. So if I have 0 bank time, I'm losing 6 points. If I have 5 bank time, I'm losing just the 1 point. If I have 10 bank time, I'm still losing just the 1 point. You always are going to lose 1 in those situations. So it is a constant struggle. You want to and you need to be getting plans, be getting spare parts, be building cars, be testing those cars. You need to be doing all that, but you can't entirely discount the fact that you need to be getting certification in these various departments too. And of course, being Vittle Lacerda, Getting certifications is going to yield benefits. Once you get 3 steps up on the certification track, you are officially certified. That is going to unlock certain benefits. One of the benefits that's going to give you is it's going to give you a talking point at the big meeting, which is where we get to the scoring. So scoring happens, there's basically 2 types of scoring. There's the end of the week short little meeting, and then there's the big meeting. The game is going to be over when you have 2 meetings of any one kind and 3 meetings of the other kind, if that makes sense to you. Did I say that okay, Alfred? Yes, good.
Basically, I think, isn't the game over when you have 3 of any kind of meeting, and then the 4th of that same kind of meeting would end the game? Isn't that correct?
When one track is at 2 and one track is at 3. So when one of them is tracking those end of the week meetings when Sandra is back at her desk, and one of them is tracking the big meetings. The big meetings are interesting. There are going to be cards that are going to be flipped up in the boardroom area, right, in the administration area, and they are going to say you are going to get victory points if you put your talking point token on this space. And this one says you're going to get points for every blue car that's in your own personal garage, on your own personal space. This one is going to give you 2 points for every certification you currently possess, right? Things like that. And the interesting thing about them...
Things that you're likely to have encountered, but it is kind of a game within a game, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, it is almost a separate skin of game on top of the existing game.
Precisely. You need to be calibrating the things that you're doing in the factory to the things that you see that are going to be the points of discussion in the boardroom this week, right? Which is kind of cool, right? Because
it's cool, but it's infuriating at the same time, because you're always going to be a step behind, and you will be having some of these not secret, but you will have a certain amount of knowledge about what you want to bring forward to the meeting.
Yes.
And of course, since you can rush or slow the game depending on where you're placing Sandra and your own workers, you can effectively make it so you have less of these encounters or more, just depending on how you dice out the meetings. There's the small meetings again, and the large meetings at essence, and so you have some control over where you want the slow you want these game to progress, how many of these kind of encounters you want to have.
Yes. And I should say that you have a hand of 3 cards at the beginning of the game. These are future topics at these big meetings. So you have a certain amount of things that you can bring up. One thing, whenever there is one of these big meetings, you're going to take one of these cards and you're just going to play it as a surprise. I'm bringing this up as a topic for the meeting. And invariably, that's going to be something that you worked on that no one else knew they should have been working on. So odds are you're going to be scoring some good points for that card, and other people will have a limited opportunity to score on that card as well. Because a lot of these cards, they'll say either 1 times, 2 times, or 3 times on the card. And what that says is how many people can glom on and use one of their talking points to score points on that card. If it says 3 times, the first person to go there, if they had, for instance, if it's the blue cars in your garage, if they had 3 blue cars in their garage, they could score 12 points because each blue car in their garage is worth 4 points on that card. But it also means somebody else can go there and score the 2 times bonus, and they could get up to 8 points if they have 2 blue cars in their garage, and so on and so forth. The other thing is that one of those 3 cards you have in your hand, you are going to add to the meeting at the end of the meeting, because all of you are going to be deciding what the next meeting's issues are going to be, and so on and so forth. It's a very, very interesting way of creating a dynamic point scoring system that you have to continually be planning for and adjusting for. I love it. I absolutely love it.
And again, when you were playing your best game, it really does feel like you're manifesting a wave, like in all the best regards. Your engine is going, and you kind of, there's never such a scarcity of spaces that you can't somehow get your point across, but you have to have a very clear vision of what you want to do and what you want to achieve. And of course, that gets mitigated against what people are bringing up and how many of these meetings we're actually having, because you can have a whole game that's working very well and just none of the topics come up. And so you're not necessarily going to be scoring points. It's just you are achieving, but you're not scoring points at these very critical meetings. So
100%. 100%. Another thing that I love about the game is the flexibility of time as a resource, right? You go to these spaces, and each one of them is like you have 2 shifts that you can spend here, which means you take 2 actions. Or you have 3 shifts, but you can also bank shifts. And bank shifts are future actions, essentially. Those are things.
Well,
that
they
you
also
can use.
mitigate Sandra's results too. I mean, they're huge in terms of like, if you have 5 bank shifts that you can be sitting on, you're gonna have a huge turn ahead. Some point you can decide when that actually springs into action, but you also don't suffer the ill effects of not having enough certificates, for instance.
Precisely.
Certifications, yeah.
Yes, exactly right. And knowing when to use that bank time, knowing how to spend it and what to use it for, is a really crucial concern in the game, because time is actions in this game. And as we all know, action economy in these games is generally the most important economy to pay attention to. It is generally the most precious resource that we have. And Vittel has created a game in which there is a fungibility and a flexibility in this time. You can use it when you need to, and at the end of the game, you're going to get a point for every bank time you have, and those are sucker points. You should have spent as much time as you could to maximize each action you have in the game when you can, to get the maximum benefit, right? To be really crushing at these meetings. And it does feel like that. The great thing about the game is that when it's meeting time, Sandra's there in the boardroom and she's already yelled at you for not being good enough and not studying hard enough at this sort of thing, and you didn't do this and you didn't do that, and you're not good enough. And you're there in the meeting and these things are on the agenda and you can't wait because, I can't wait to bring up this issue because guess what? I got 3 blue cars in my garage, and I know that the company is pushing us to produce green cars. And then Alfred goes and he puts his talking point on the blue car space before I do, and he's just stealing my thunder. And now instead of 12 points, I'm only going to get 8 points, and I hate him so much. It really does. It feels like I feel like I'm in a cutthroat Japanese zaibatsu, right?
Your middle management.
Salaryman. I'm a salaryman.
Heaven, into a certain degree. Yeah, salaryman happening. And also the fact too, there is that kind of nice thing as well, that you really do feel like you're building something. There is enough necessity kind of clockwork action happening that when you get designs and you get the parts and you get the car off the lot and you go and test it, like you really have done something. And it took a lot of interaction and involvement to get those parts to work together in concert. So when you have that concept, when you've played the game enough that you can see your 18 moment where you've been locked in the supply closet and you walk out with a fully formed, I don't know where I'm taking this metaphor, but still this kind of action that really comes together, a plan that comes together.
I love it.
There is something very satisfying about it.
Are there any? We've mostly talked positives. Are there any negatives? What are the things that you wish was a little different in this?
Well, I will say I adore this game, but there is a fiddliness to it. There is you have to do all the things, and so like I love The Gallerist, for instance, my favorite game of all time. And part of the reason I love it so much is because although you are going to eventually do all the things, you can kind of be a specialist. You can work your lane. Yeah. It feels very satisfying to focus in on a particular set of goals that you can achieve and really feel like you're making headway in the game space. Versus this, there's no avoiding it. You kind of have to play the card game. It isn't just that's where some points are. And the small meetings especially are much more point based around that. It's just you're not playing the game unless you're doing kind of all the things in middling fashions. And some people, because of turn order or because of their own achievement, they just can kind of get ahead of you. And there's not really ways to claw your way back. I mean, there's certainly little pivots and turns and constant intrigue, but between the fiddliness and that kind of aspect of I feel like you can be a few beats back in this game and just kind of be out at essence. And that's not coming from a place of great experience. I've played this game enough to feel like I've seen it, but I do feel like you have to be involved in everything at some level to even have a chance.
Huh. I mean, I do agree that it is a game much more about process than Gallerist is, right? Gallerist, you can specialize, you can ignore certain parts of the design to some degree, right? Not entirely, but to some degree.
Entirely.
Whereas in this game, you need to have a plan, and then you need to have a part matching that plan, and then you need to make cars of that type, and you need to have them on the test track, and so on and so forth. Now, you don't have to do all of that, but somebody has to do all of that for the gears to function to some degree. That said, there is specialization in the game. There are people that are going to be scoring the majority of their points by cars in their garage. There are some people that are going to be scoring the majority of their points by upgraded parts. There are some people, your first game, you didn't do it the way that you should do it to maximize your points, but there's a certification game that could be played where you're okay coming in slightly lower on the cars and the parts game, but you've got all the certifications and you have meeting cards that reward those certifications, and you can actually sneak in because everybody is competing so hard for those cars that you can actually sneak in for some pretty big points that are uncontested and pretty easy to get, and also minimizing the ability for Sandra to penalize you in any way. So I think there is a variety of ways to play the game, but you are right that you can't avoid the central mechanism of the game because the game is about process.
And I will say that, so you have all these different aspects to which you can get some bonus points, you can get some victory conditions, but you still have to go to all the spaces to achieve those because of the muddling. Yeah. Because there's a lot of spaces where you're kind of pulled in a few different directions, which is very satisfying, but those different directions still require the same placement often. And so you're kind of making decisions over each other. You're kind of stepping each other's toes, which is not bad. And a lot of Blizzard games really thrive in this. But it can be a little bit. It can just be a little bit dispiriting sometimes, where you place a car on the track. That's the car you need. It gets taken away. Of course, there's a little take that involved, but it's just a little bit frustrating. That's and that little bit of frustration can bloom into outright dissension, depending on how bad Sandra or whatever the thing is coming down the pipeline that you might have not envisioned happens to step on you. It can feel pretty hard.
I can totally see that. I do think the game is a little fiddly. For me, the Scooby Snack aspect of it, there are so many things in this game, like everything. Hey, the game wants you to produce city cars, the green cars right now, and the first 3 green cars produced are going to get you a talking point at the next meeting, and so you grab that. And hey, when you get to this certification, guess what? You're going to get a free book, or you're going to get a banked time. And there's so many things giving out these micro awards that just for me, for my own play style, I'm like, okay, I get it, and I see that, but I don't personally need that, but. It's a pretty amazing design.
I mean, I will say, just as a small mitigation of that, if you have already, there's this whole thing about getting certification and unlocking an area where you can contain more. Mm-hmm. So before that happens, you're kind of capped off. And so oftentimes you'll find somebody who's running around the ring doing really well, but because they haven't necessarily gotten their certificates, they're just playing a fast game, they won't be able to totally maximize. So there's a little bit of a thing. I'm sure a very talented player will know exactly when to push the accelerator or the EV accelerator, so to speak, on getting your certificates going, unlocking the thing versus exactly when the car should happen. I mean, maybe a perfect game, you're kind of hitting all these marks at just the right time. So that in that aspect, the game is so good feeling. I mean, not just the Scooby Snacks, but just really knowing exactly when to be slowing down and speeding up.
Yeah.
On that rondel.
Totally agree. I think it's a brilliant design. Let's talk about design for a quick second. It is a gorgeous game. Tool came in, and in the driver's edition, the central rondel of the game, which is actually a strip that goes between all the different, it's sort of like a central corridor from which all the departments extend off of. This department's on the left, this department's on the right, then you move ahead, this department's on the left, this department's on the right, so on and so forth. In this case, the central hallway, as it were, is safety yellow, I should say. Mm-hmm. And the colors of the various departments are green and kind of a very muted, very pastel green blue.
This is on the driver's edition, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm talking now about EV, Kanban EV.
Right.
Gorgeous, highly visible. It looks like a factory floor, but a very stylish, gorgeous factory floor. And he just did such an amazing job of increasing the visibility and the understandability of a very complicated, very crowded board, and makes it all feel like it works. It is gorgeous. I love the fact that your workers have little hard hats and little stripes of that are the reflective safety material. I love that Sandra has a little clipboard that she carries around with her. I mean, it is a pretty beautiful design,
it's a great example where the design lessens the fiddliness.
Yes.
I mean, the game has enough going on already, but then it just makes it so that, and also for a game that has so much on the board, you don't have your own little player breakouts. I mean, you do have your own player breakout kind of boards, but you're just spending so much time on that board. So much of what you're poring over is happening on the board. So anytime you could lessen the fiddliness overall, I think it makes the game so much more understandable.
Totally. And given that the cars, the 5 different car models are relatively similar. They're not that different sculpts. They did a great job of differentiating them. The green car is slightly smaller and slightly more, rounded than all of the other ones. That's the city car. That looks like the smart car. The blue one is a little more traditional in terms of the design. That looks like the Prius. It very much does look like the Prius. The black car has got kind of a stripe down the side of it. That's the super luxury sports car. The red car, it looks like the Tesla Model S. It's the luxury car. And the gray car, I swear to you, it's the Cybertruck. The art
Yes.
on the art on the tile is the Cybertruck, and the design of the wooden sculpt looks like the Cybertruck. I love the fact that that basically he has taken actual designs and the actual classes of EVs that are coming out right now and have put them into the lexicon and the iconography of the game. I think it's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then in terms of just the Lacerda world, I know this is one of your faves. I mean, I do think that I hope to see more evolutions of these games from the past, like Venus. I have a feeling a lot of these games are due for the kind of reskinning, reevaluation. EV doesn't break the mold too hard in terms of any rules changes, or at least not in super critical, significant ways. But I do think the reimagining of it, not just in the thematic kind of addendum, but just the cleanliness really makes me feel like it's reinvigorated. And I just can't wait to see this happen again and again. Like, unlike most of the movie space or kind of other worlds where we get this revisionism of previous held intellectual property, I think this really is nice for the board game, especially for games that are slightly outside of our current play style, right? We haven't played Kanban in a little while, and it's really nice to see it coming back on boards, and I can't wait to play more.
Totally. But we're not going to get into rules changes because they're so minor.
So subtle.
But there is, I'll say one thing I've already kind of mentioned, which is that in the old version, if you got up to 5 bank time, Mean Sandra couldn't hurt you. Now you're always going to lose 1 point plus any points you lose because you don't have enough time banked. The other thing is that there is a Supercharger mini expansion that does significantly change the game in a way. It basically gives you these 4 Supercharger tiles, and when you unlock one, you can put it on a department. 5, I believe. 5 tiles. You could put it on a department, and when you do, you unlock a permanent bonus for the rest of the game referring to that department. And the bonuses are nice. So in terms of what you were saying, Alfred, where you wish there was more differentiation in the way you play the game, I think Supercharger will do a lot to do that, because once you supercharge a station, you become significantly better at that particular station, more so than any other player. So if you supercharge a different station than another person does, you're off to the races, kind of. And it's sort of, the game is suddenly pushing you to focus on one aspect of the factory and not the other. For instance, the administration part of the game, where Alfred mentioned it's a place where you could take fewer actions, but you can take an action anywhere else on the factory floor. Well, guess what? If you supercharge that space, then the space that used to be only 1 action becomes a 2-action space, and the action space that was for 2 actions becomes a 3-action space. So it becomes just like every other space, only you're in administration, so you can take actions anywhere, which is a really, really powerful little thing.
Now, is that necessitated by getting your full 6 certificates or certifications?
I have to. Let me take a quick peek here because
I mean, no stress. I'm just saying it'd be an interesting change because it kind of feels like you're playing this mini game constantly, right? Where you're upping your certification degrees, and you kind of get to this place where you eventually get above the amount to which you're like minimum. You've kind of gotten your bonus. There's up to 5 bonuses that have to do with player order and all these things, and give you these little mini Scooby Snap kind of bonuses as well. So there's all these little things going on in the background, but there's not really as much of a push to get to the top mastery level of something because it just gives you 1 extra bonus, but you've already crossed that threshold a little while ago.
Well, and so the first person to get there gets
that was necessitated. Yeah.
The first person to get there also gets an extra talking point, which actually is not insignificant. So they get the first person to get to the top of the board of the certification track, any certification track, gets 2 bonuses, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Nice.
Let's see.
But it does sound like a little extra asymmetry might be exactly the solve that I'm looking for, so I'm excited to play that version.
It says that it is when working shifts in R&D. That's when you can spend a shift to take a speed charger token and place it on the space of your choice to unlock that bonus. So it turns R&D. R&D, by the way, is where you are doing some super important actions. You are testing cars to put that car in your garage. You are testing parts to upgrade that part. They are the big scoring places. So using an action in that space to take a speed charger bonus instead is very, very costly. So it's interesting. Unfortunately,
it sounds great.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're playing online, and the online implementations do not have the speed charger mini expansion. So we have not personally tested it, but looking at it, I can say that I really want to play with that, and I want to play with you with that, Alfred, because I think it could very well address what you brought up, what you see as something that the game could be better at. I think it might just be better at with this particular expansion.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Final thoughts?
I mean, I adore it. I love all Lacerda. I am a full. So this just goes back a little bit. If we can reverse time. So Elfenland, you're a big fan. I'm not so much. Elfenland's old school. Elfenland is punishy and brutal, and you can kind of get through that game without feeling necessarily that you've touched down. I mean, this is me, 100% just me. That you haven't really touched down in game space. You've played with others, but there isn't that much of that kind of constant hit of I'm doing something, actions are happening, the clockwork mechanism is being turned, versus a game like this, fully modern style Euro, where every move has like 1,000 repercussions, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but largely you feel like very both in the theme, but also incredibly enabled in terms of game. Yeah. And so thusly, I just adore that kind of modern gameplay, and this really is a significant version of that to me, even if it is a little bit samey in terms of like, I just like the way it exposes itself, the way it plays, the way it decides to unfurl itself is gorgeous. So
totally agree, except that I say let's play them both. Let's play them both. I love them. I love old school. I love good old Smash Mouth football, which is what Elfenland is. What Elfenland is.
Blood Bowl,
I also, kind of. I also love this. It's my favorite Little Lacerda. I can't quite elucidate why. I love Gallerist as well. I think Lisboa and On Mars, while I do love them, the squeeze becomes harder to get the juice out. There's a lot of juice, but the squeeze is pretty hard. Whereas with this one, it feels like the perfect ratio of juice to squeeze, if I can bring back a metaphor that I have not used in quite some time. I absolutely love the game. That was Kanban EV 2020 release, and you should be able to find it out and about. If it's interesting to you, by all means, check it out. We could not recommend it more highly.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.